Vivian, Georgia, thank you so much for joining me and also the VanCAF audience. Just really briefly, my name is Andrea Warner. I'm the author of Buffy St. Marie, the authorized biography, and We Ought to Know How Four Women Ruled the 90s and Changed Canadian Music. I'm a settler who was born and raised in Vancouver on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. So I will introduce Vivian Chong's first love is drawing. Ever since she could hold a pencil, she drew day and night, and after formal training, eventually worked as a graphic designer, video editor, and 3D animator. After a rare medical reaction to ibuprofen left her without sight, she experienced a creative rebirth and became a medal-winning triathlete, an access-focused yoga instructor, and a motivational speaker, a musician, a dancer, and a performer. She's part of the Brazilian percussion ensemble Samba Alegua and performs regularly with them in community events in Toronto. In 2016, she created and performed a one-woman show, The Sunglasses Monologue, which toured throughout Canada. And in 2020, she collaborated with choreographer Kathleen Ray to create Dancing with the Universe, a dance theater production starring Vivian, along with a cast of dancers and a musician. And she is the co-author and illustrator of Dancing After 10. Vivian, hi.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for doing this. Andrea Warner is a comics artist, writer, and editor living in Southern Ontario. She's best known for her debut graphic memoir, Dumb, Living Without a Voice, the chronicle of her severe vocal injury and sustained vocal condition, which causes her pain from using her voice. The difficult experience has led her to work as a cranial sacral therapist, a meditation facilitator, and an improvising musician, blending elements of healthcare, body awareness, and creative expression within constraints. She has extended her love of the voice into a community arts organization called Ma Vocal Arts that celebrates the diversity, creativity, and power of the voice with live showcase-style events several times a year. Webber is an active member of the graphic medicine community of artists who make comics that relate to health, speaking, and give workshops at conferences across North America. Hi, Georgia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
I'm really excited to speak with you both. I read the book and I just consumed it all in one sitting while I was outside in the shade, and it was a really, it didn't really matter where I was sitting. I was transported so deeply by the story and by the art, and I just really felt like I was there in this journey. So thank you both so much. It's such a powerful story. What, I know this is a strange question to start with, but what didn't end up making the cut? If you think back to the first draft of the book, because there's so much story in this book, it could have probably been 700 pages.
What didn't making the cut is a sex scene. There is a sex scene of one of the character, and and I believe Georgia can answer that too, because we would talk back and forth, and we also have my friend Kathleen as my eyes to help me see the continuity of all the panels. So one of the panel was dropped out. It was the sex scene of one of the character. So Georgia can help answer this one.
I, for some reason, don't remember anything about a sex scene, so maybe that's it prior to this moment. But that's actually that's what's so difficult about the idea of cramming a life into a book in any circumstance, is there's so much that feels significant for the person experiencing it, that definitely feeds the nuanced expression of all of the bigger events. Like, there so many major moments and then all of these very mundane moments, but they are also important because they're also a part of that experience. So obviously we had to go with the more sort of meaningful beats of like the events in Vivian's life, and then also try to fill in Like there's a few pages of scenery where we're trying to express Vivian's profound boredom, and things like there could have probably been a lot of pages of that if we were trying to represent the amount of time that she was spending sort of waiting for things to change and trying to work out what to do. Vivian, please stop me if I'm not characterizing this in the way that you like, but it's, when I think about what we were cutting, I mean, I only know what Vivian told me, so I'm sure there's lots that was cut at that point because she was deciding what to say. And then when we were working on the actual contents of the book, what we had, we only cut down by probably like 10 or 15 pages from the original plan. And those things were a lot of small moments that just didn't quite add enough to warrant the story being completely altered to include them.
I see.
And
Yeah.
yep, thank you, Georgia. And to wrap it all up, when I decided to make it a collaboration, that could probably go into your next question. I already decided I'm gonna open myself up and my story up as a collaboration. So the story in the end, when it make it to the book, is already bigger than me and my story. I have the publishing house creative team helping me with color enhancement. I have the copywriters to help me to fine tune the bubbles for dialogues. I have my friend Kathleen to help me see through continuity and make sure everything makes sense when we change the order of different panels. And I have Georgia come in to see my story in her own eyes. And I have Kathleen to help me see it through, see whether that's what I say in the beginning and that's what we see together through her eyes. So the whole project in the end is bigger than me. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think there's something incredibly beautiful about the power of trust then on your part to work in this kind of collaborative arrangement with people you don't know and people you do know. What's that like for you?
From the moment I met one person, I met Georgia, and then I met Kathleen. I knew Kathleen before, but I didn't really know her until I gone through this project with her. And then later on, I met the creative team. I didn't meet them in person, but I met them in their writing. I met them in their creative input. So all in all, is trust has opened up so many doors for me to get to know a person, not just only through one dimension. And with a sight loss and meeting people, definitely is not visual and it's not just the surface. It's not the exterior, it's the internal substance of what the person brings to the project or the meeting.
Yes, yes, definitely. I mean, I think like, you know, a lot of, and particularly when you talk a little bit about so bringing an artistic, being able to sort of communicate sort of the minutia and the grand moments, like communicating boredom through visual and written words. A lot of this is, I mean, not, you know, this sounds a little facile, but a lot of people are currently at like the end of week 8 or 9 of pandemic isolation. There are going to be moments that resonate a bit differently for people as they read this book. So, you know, what is it, Georgia, to try and you know, sort of create that visual element of storytelling of someone else's experience?
Whoa, okay.
You know, it's like no big deal, not a big question. It's fine. It's totally fine.
Well, the question is like, oh, people are going to resonate with boredom, and then like, what was this? I mean, yeah, that's fairly significant for me, even before creating this work, because my history is as a memoirist, just working on my own life story, and actually that choice comes from a profound discomfort in me with the idea of fiction as me speaking for another person. So taking on this project was a very specific intention of mine to say, I'm not speaking for Vivian, and I'm not trying to remake her world the way that I see it, but to sort of find a balance between what I can see and what she's saying and the like feelings that she's trying to convey. to the best of my ability. And then also we're having this other collaboration of representing that, like Kathleen looking at it with her eyes as an outsider because she's not the artist making the work, but being able to be close enough to it to see what I'm doing and then match it and communicate it to Vivian and understand Vivian's intention. And that was a really delicate process as like a procedure, but it's also internally for me a process to figure out what is the most truthful version of representing someone else's reality that I can offer as someone who is clearly interpreting it. So yeah, very delicate feeling. And at the same time, I felt that was a sort of almost an easier place to put my attention than the representation of my own life, because it, like we were talking about editing a moment ago, editing out the experiences that I've had and the things that I want to share for creating my own story had like a lot of weight to it for being the person who's living it and the person who's representing it. I found that actually a little bit less, I felt a little bit less of that kind of constant questioning about what was good to share and not share when I was on the outside of the story.
Yeah.
Listening to Vivian and hearing what she wanted to say, and then trying to sort of feel into it and see with my mind's eye, and then also be there like at her apartment and see it and take it in my experience. And also I chose to put myself into the book at the end to make sure that it was extremely clear to the reader that this is an interpretation by another person. As much as I'm just trying to facilitate Vivian's voice, it's still impossible to remove me from the process, just because it's my eyes and my hand drawing a lot of what's taking place, especially in her present life.
Yeah,
yeah,
that makes total sense.
To add on to Georgia's answer, even just convey the feeling of boredom, we have done a lot. We have done the sensational piece, which is very important when someone has no sights left. Her world is interior and feeling and internal reaction to the external stimulation. So sound come across as sound wave, and it give me a jolt sometimes when I don't know it's coming. Or a temperature of touching a fridge is normal for most people that see the fridge coming in view, but I would walk to it and touch it, and I know I'm there because of the temperature and the texture. And my hand glides through the wall to feel the distance of how many steps I walk, to help me feel my surrounding. When it changed around the corner, the wall narrows and the wall comes to an end. So all these has been conveyed for my description to Georgia's drawing. So there were a lot of things being conveyed in sensorial. So I think that's really unique about our book.
I completely agree.
Well, and I just wanted to add too, that's actually why we ended up, like, Vivian drew new things only from that sensorial place and from like memory and from her internal vision, and including that new work that was really born from inside of this experience of no longer being able to see. Like I was trying to interpret that as much as I could, but we actually wanted to put Vivian's interpretation of that like present day into the book as well.
And I think it comes through like really beautifully, honestly. I mean, it's a very powerful thing to sort of go back in time, but also to sort of carry forward into contemporary time and present time. You know, Vivian, this is your life journey, really, and a significant portion of your life journey in this book. What has it been like for you to go back in time and sort of revisit trauma and sort of think about how you can handle that without, further traumatizing yourself?
Very good question. I think trauma to everyone means different things. To me, it's a chapter of my life. So that's why it's so important for this one piece of my life to be captured, and not in just any way, but in a very, very delicate way, to place down on paper with drawings, my first love, and with a lot of thoughts and with a team. And I took it seriously, not to relive the moments, but to put it down and it transformed into an artwork. And then I can let it go and let the story go out to the world and make its ripple. So it's no longer mine. In a sense, I already let it go long ago when I opened up my first 120 pages of the book and I hand it out to everybody, make photocopy and gave my original out. I already decided this is an artwork and it's going to transform. So this is my one way of seeing trauma as an art form and let it out and let it go. And in the most sentimental way. So does that answer your question?
It does, absolutely. I mean, does it, we talk a lot about vulnerability as artists, and a lot of people, sometimes end up feeling sort of like exploited in situations, or they don't understand really what it is to sort of mine the darkest parts of their life for artistic consumption. And but I feel like you have such a strong understanding of the story that you want to tell, and you have so much control over it in this particular situation and in all aspects of your life. Like, I mean, does it feel empowering to be telling your story in these ways?
It's super empowering. And once we decide, we all have this power of vulnerability and open up to empower ourselves, but everybody take a different route to do it. So for me, I was stepping into my unknown. Not only I can't see the final product, I also don't see Georgia's drawing to begin with. I don't see anybody's faces. And I count on, what I can count on is I have trust in the world and I have trust in art. And I just open myself for the process to evolve and allow all the possibility to come into light. Even adding color into the comic book, it was the final step of the book. And it was just so beautiful, and other input from the team. And it wasn't our original plan. We didn't know whether we could have budget doing it. And even just a small color had guided the book in a miraculous way. So, all in all, I lost my train of thought. I'm really excited that the power of vulnerability, it's not just about oneself. Once you decided, okay, I see my vulnerable side and I decided it is beautiful and open it up, in the end, if you go through your journey, you will feel very empowered if you just allow things to happen, not in a bad way.
I think it's really, that's one of the big takeaways for me from this book. The other thing that I was going to say is I really love watching you as a character in your book. I'm not going to confuse that. Like, I know it's memoir, it's you, but there's like a fictionalized element to a certain extent, because that's what we all become when we are, telling our own stories. But I love watching you in this book come into a place where you are always asking for what you need. And I know it's an incredible thing to witness.
I think in my journey of asking what I need, sometimes I really don't know, is that all it is about? But then I have to remind myself I'm an artist. Doesn't matter what I need, just keep doing what I'm good at. And then it will lead you to a better place.
Yes, that's completely, you're completely right. Yes. What was it like the first time that you two met?
I'll let Georgia answer this one.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so we met up outside of Vivian's pottery studio because she's doing pottery now, and that was an easy place for me to reach her. So I went and found the studio and found her, and she let me know right away that we needed to walk with her hand on the back of my arm so that she knew where to go. And we had Catcher with us as well, but that was just a way to get together from one place to another. And we just crossed the street to go to a coffee shop. And yeah, started talking about the possibility of this book and just like what was happening. The show was going to happen in the spring, and that was a huge undertaking for Vivian. But then we wanted the book to come out at the time of the show, so this was going to turn into a very, very fast-tracked project for two people who are just meeting for the first time. I mean, it's very interesting. Like on the one hand, partly I had wished that we had more time to get to know each other before starting the work, because every bit of getting to know each other was just under the pressure of, we're doing this thing and we got to do it fast.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it might have actually been harder to do that way when I reflect on it and think about, if one of my friends, someone I already know in my life, said, hey, do you want to work on a really fast book project together about a really traumatic experience and all that I've done with it since I've, remade my life, I would probably feel, I think my interpretation would come from a more like personal place.
Mm-hmm.
And that might include my like assessment or judgment or feelings about them in a way that I could definitely imagine sort of clouding the person's voice, because
Yeah.
I might feel a bit more like I had that internal view. And with Vivian and just getting to know her that way, it was just an absolute sense of like, I don't know anything about you except for what you tell me.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important because it gives you, like, I'm speaking, the you in this sentence is Vivian. It gives Vivian power
Yeah.
to choose what to say and what not to say and how to say it. And I just have to take that as what it is, because I don't have a deeper knowledge and I don't have past experiences to overlay. So yeah, I mean, it was like, fairly nice. We just had some tea and it was short. I think we talked for about an hour, but that was just the beginning of like the bigger project that would include a lot more like, yeah, phone conversations and Kathleen being involved, which is very helpful and very important. Yeah, we were really getting to know each other as a trio. Like Vivian said, she knew Kathleen before, but like really got to know her and working on this. And I didn't know either of them before. So this was a very like unit type of collaboration.
Yeah. Yeah. Vivian, how about you? Like how did you feel like connecting to Georgia the first time?
I feel, first of all, want to thank my friend Kathleen for researching. We are looking for people who live in Toronto that we can collaborate with, and someone who can understand a medical situation. So we find Georgia, and Georgia genre for drawing is medical. So we were with mostly me talking when I first met her. So I gave her a sense of who I am and where do I work. I work in a pottery studio, and I let her know my dog, which is here, he's Catcher. And Georgia have a sense that I use a seeing eye dog. And I also explained to her over tea, I used other things before, but the dog works so the best. So it was just a chance for me again to introduce myself to another person, which is a lot of times is what I do on a daily basis. When people see the dog, they have questions, and I have to answer them politely, but not getting into walking with my dog and get distracted.
Yeah.
And when I go to start another art project, I introduce myself. So I feel like it was a lot of introducing myself. So I'm getting really good at that.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine your sunglasses monologue really was sort of a big way to introduce yourself across the country.
It was very big. And the really interesting part is how I got into that project is because of another project that I was auditioning for a comedy troupe. And so there were 10 people lining up by the wall, and there was a panel of 6 judges to decide which 2 will go into center stage and which 2 will interact, and then start giving them something to improvise on the stage. And I got paired up with a guy, and I followed my scene partner. As he walked forward, I was following him parallel to his footsteps. And as I go by listening, so I kept following his talking, and until I realized the next step, I was airing it, and I stepped in the air and I fell off stage for the audition.
Oh my God.
That's when I realized that, oh my God, why am I trying so hard to fit in? I don't need that. And it's not about the world come to their senses to include me. I had like a big bell ringing, like a wake-up call that, you know what? You should just do what you do all the time, that introduce yourself and write a play about introducing yourself and your story. And that's how everything began in a way, because I fell off stage from an audition. It led led to me writing my own play. And then it led to me getting some recognition. And then Kathleen, who is a dance producer, recognizing my show and want to collaborate. But first, I have to show her something about me. Again, introducing myself.
Yeah.
So I gave her my comic book that I drew 12 years ago. And I said, here you go. It's hard to say everything about my life in one sitting. So why don't you take a look and ask me questions? And you already know about my dancing. So let's see the other side of me. So she sat there for an hour. I read the book back and forth. And she said, oh my God, you have something here. And that's when we start thinking to collaborate with Georgia. First of all, we were looking for an artist, and then we come to Georgia, and that's how we go into this collaboration, all because I was falling off the stage for my audition.
Well, and then one of the things that I actually love so much about this book, and maybe it's because I tend towards like, I always kind of want to find the humor somewhere in something. And when you talk about like attending, like, you know, learning comedy and like how to inject that humor and like bringing it back to the falling off the stage, like, I mean, let's face it, physical comedy, great stuff, super funny. But like there are these moments that are so beautifully funny in the book, even though like maybe I was sort of crying and really upset the page before. And I just think that you guys handle that really beautifully. It's very nuanced.
Thank you for seeing that. It is innate who I am as I evolve as a person. From the beginning of my story till now, I think what I gain is comedy. it really helped me to see the world in different lenses. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I think there's like a formula, right? Like time plus tragedy or distance plus tragedy equals comedy or something. I don't know. Whatever. You get the farther you get away from it, the funnier something can be.
Or sometimes when you don't remember it and you look back, hey, that moment is pretty funny. But when you're going through it, it's super brutal.
Yeah, in all honesty, there are several moments where like one of the characters, like I guess like an old boyfriend or whatever, he is just so self-involved and heinous, and you're just like, how is this a real person? And then you're like, oh no, this is definitely a real person. These are behaviors that only come from certain types of privilege. And I think most of us have known people like that. So what is it to you know, to have included you know, people in your life who have sometimes been really terrible, and you've made peace? Like you talk about the forgiveness in the book and how that frees you. But I mean, I am also so grateful for knowing these people, because I just think, wow, it really puts a keen perspective on just how self-involved some folks are.
And I do believe everyone has a story that shape who they are. And I believe we are here to live our life, not other people's life. So sometimes when I get too invested in someone's life and figure out why did they do that? Who are they? What are they thinking? That actually takes up all my time in my life. So when I come to my senses that, you know what, I have to acknowledge that something happened, definitely. Mm-hmm. But what about that I spend my life from now on living my life and not hang up on the stuff they did in my life with me? Those are the chapter in my life. Yes, it happened, but let me just create more beautiful stuff in my life from now on.
I mean, that's really great. And also real burn on me as a journalist who does nothing but interview other people about their lives. Just teasing you. Georgia, what has it been like for you to sort of get to know Vivian's journey? Like when you first read and heard about everything, you know, was there your own sense of sort of feeling like, can I do this justice?
Oh, well, I mean, I knew from the start that I couldn't. I mean, there's no amount of interpretation that I can do that that would replace and adequately express that direct sense of Vivian's experience. It was always going to be the best I could do. I knew that. And maybe because I knew that, I was more ready to take it on, because if I had really wanted it to be so accurate, I would have just been so frustrated all the time. So yeah, maybe that's the short answer. I mean, because I believe so strongly in people's personal experiences as their own, and really like entrusting everyone their own agency for how they feel about something and what it's like for them. I very much start with the idea that, like, I don't really know what it's like for you. You're going to have to tell me, and I'm just going to do my best to understand and to make that clear.
That's great. And I think is good instructive living for all of us, really. I will take that sort of going forward as well. What both of you have experience, and probably fairly unique experiences within sort of the medical system, and the experiencing ableist messaging about what you can and can't do. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how this book and how your artistic practices can help challenge that kind of messaging?
Challenge. I see it as opportunity.
Uh-huh.
So when people usually say to me, no, you can't do it, that's usually when I investigate how I can do it. It probably will not happen the way they think I can do it, but I would figure out a way that I could do it, and that would work for me and might not work for other people. So challenge to me is just something people put out there because they cannot envision bigger picture. That's okay. That's just their view. So I don't live like that. And I usually, have an image of things will happening and it will come to fruition, but I would not see all the steps in between until I get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that sort of is the way that this book can represent a different reality, or a different way that things can happen, is that it's not like we didn't go to any great lengths to express ableist opinion in the book and then directly debunk it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were very few moments where someone else in the book, another character, would say something to Vivian that was like very clearly ableist and diminishing of her potential. I think there are a couple moments where something like that is coming through, but it isn't something that we were trying to do in creating the book, was specifically break apart those ableist ideas. But Vivian living her life is doing that. So just sharing the life is enough to show another way that things can happen, and potentially be an answer to a question if someone is displaying, like if a medical professional or even just someone in your life is displaying a sort of ableist perspective on, well, of course, blind people or people with any disability can't do certain things. The book is not saying specifically, yes, they can, but just showing you that, like, obviously they can because she did.
Yes. Yeah, it's a real, like, duh, just.
I don't need to argue with you about the idea of that. I can just show you it's already happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did have so many people come and like, did you draw the book? I'm like, yes, I draw some of the book, and it's a collaboration. They said, how do you draw some of the book? I'm like, well, then you have to buy my book, then you will know. And it's a true story. When they buy my book, they would know from the inside and out how I create a book.
Absolutely. And that's like, and yes, everybody obviously go buy this book. It's amazing. And I love it so much. What is it like to, have a book and supposed to have a show come out during a pandemic? How has that affected you guys?
It's because we have a show and it has a deadline. That's why our book was coinciding with the show launch for the book launch.
Mm-hmm.
But because of pandemic, everything changed. So the show is canceled for now, and the book is go ahead. So we're just kind of on the edge of seeing what's gonna happen and just go with it. And I'm so happy. I was telling Georgia before that we wrap up the project early enough that it didn't affect our publication. It didn't affect sharing it to our fans right now. I was really, really grateful of the timing, actually.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we did get lucky on that, and then very unlucky with the show aspect. Like, you know, I was fully prepared to be at that show every night for the beginning of April, and obviously Vivian and Kathleen were striving, and right at the end of that process when everything fell apart. So there had been a lot of investment, and I guess
Yeah.
the book now sort of stands as like, I mean, tribute to that effort, even though it's not so explicitly linked. And it's maybe one of the regrets that I have about the book is just that we didn't actually describe the link to the dance show with some involvement of the show in the book. Like they were still separate objects. And now that
Yeah.
this hasn't happened, I'm like, oh, but if like I wish we had included some images of like photographs of them dancing together or something that would have actually given that face to that project, which has now been sort of delayed or taken away.
Yeah.
See the
Yeah.
next book, Georgia.
Yeah.
Never say never.
That's perfect. I mean, because you can do, you know, a part two post pandemic and like how the show comes back together and like how everything's happening. It'll be really beautiful. You know, my last question for you both is just, you know, Vivian, you talk about together we show how collaboration makes a kinder world. And I want to just talk a little bit about like what a kinder world looks like to both of you.
I believe a kinder world has to start with being kind to yourself. You have to believe in yourself in whatever capacity. In my case, I believe I'm an artist. No matter what way I can do my arts to represent myself, from the past to present to the future, that's what I would get inspired on, and I'll go with it and follow my instinct as an artist. So for me, I forgot the question. Can you ask me?
What does kindness looks like? What does kindness look
Kind of
like to you?
world. Yeah. So that's being kind to yourself, that you know who you are before you can know what the world is about to you or what everybody means to you. You have to know yourself and be kind to yourself and believe in yourself. That's my take on it.
Thank you, Vivian. Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, I would basically agree with all of that and then just build on it, because what we have when we're interacting with other people is like many, many projections of ourselves and people who are projecting themselves onto us. And then we find something between us that includes a bit of us both. And I mean, that's just at the scale of like being a human who has relationships with friends and coworkers and family. And then we have this huge wide world where unfortunately we've built a lot of messaging into our society that does diminish the individual's like creative or caring spirit, or the capacity to make mistakes and the capacity to hurt people without punishment, and other routes for even like, I mean, I'm expressing these larger ideas about how we deal with what's good and what's bad, and how we deal with pursuing ideals that may be different for different people, and who is stepped on to get there, like
Yeah.
who's suppressed along the way. And unfortunately, at that large scale, we have huge projects to work on. But really, all of those things we also see reflected inside of us and how we treat ourselves and how we treat each other on a day-to-day basis, moment to moment, like what Vivian's talking about with just finding ways to be kind to ourselves and acknowledge who we are, all the good that we have to offer, and the ways in which we can falter, make mistakes, hurt people, and those things inform who we become when we grow from them. There's a lot to say about this idea of a kinder world that I feel like does also have to be an individual project before it becomes a bigger project, because we do so much reflecting and resonating for each other that trying to go outside first is always kind of like a crazy making project for me, trying to control what's out there. But the way that everything changes when it starts with you can feel very effortless and easy for those bigger things, and for hopefully that to spread even to the level of like how our society or country or world is cooperating.
Absolutely. And I think like one of the things that the book really does, in my mind, is really it models that inner kindness, it models inner compassion, it models and it models sort of like what a compassionate world could create. So I thank you both so much for this amazing book. Do you have anything that you'd like to add that I haven't talked about? Because I mean, it's our time, it's a luxury. Is there anything I missed?
I just want to bring this one up because he's really warm. And
Ah,
hi, Catcher, say hi. Oh, he's sleepy. I just want to acknowledge that my dog helps me so much through the time of many stages in my recovery as a human being, not just the exterior, but in my soul. He helps me heal. So just want to acknowledge that he's my roommate, my great companion.
well, I really loved getting to the catcher portion of the book. So, and we've lost you on video, but I loved seeing him for as long as we got to, Vivian.
Oh.
Like midway through talking about catcher, we lost you on video, but he was there and we saw him and you guys both looked great. So
he's a mysterious one.
Yeah, I mean he is not in it for fame. That's all that we know. All right, well, thank you both so much. I really appreciate this, and on behalf of VanCAF, we really are so grateful that this book is in the world.
Thank you, Andrea and VanCAF. Love talking to you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.